All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. You get a visual today. Um, I guess you're gonna see. I like my hands. I did not do a test shot of this. I just looked through the screen. It looks like you can see my book at least. I don't think you can see me, but if you can, it's cool too. We're gonna read between 5 and 10 more pages of this bad boy. Susan Faludi's Backlash. Welcome to Backlash. Enjoying it quite a bit. Got my snacks here. Got my tea. And, all right, let's go. Starting over page 5. But what equality are all these authorities talking about? If American women are so equal, why do they represent 2/3 of all poor adults? Oh, we already read this. I think we're on page 6. The availability of different forms of contraception has declined. Research for new birth control is virtually halted. It's even worse now. New laws restricting abortion or even information about abortion for young and poor mothers has been passed, and the U.S. Supreme Court has shown little ardor in defending the right it granted in 1973. And look at us now. And this book was written in 1991, by the way, once again for context. Nor is women's struggle for equal education over, as a 1989 study found 3/4 of all high schools still violate the federal law banning sex discrimination in education. They just get away with it. Democratic presidents do nothing. Republican presidents, of course, do nothing. They exacerbate the problem. It blows my mind. It just shows how hands-off, how lazy our presidents have been. If I were president, it wouldn't be this way. In colleges, undergraduate women receive only 70% of the aid undergraduate men get in grants and work-study jobs. And I'll interject the fact, and now 60% of the college graduates these days are women. So it didn't work. Men still don't go to college anymore. I got my degree already. 70% of the aid undergraduate men get in grants and work-study jobs. And women's sports programs receive a pittance compared to men's, of course. A review of state equal education laws in the 1980s found that only 13 states had adopted the minimum provisions required by the federal Title IX law, and only 7 states had anti-discrimination regulations that covered all education levels. Like if our president, obviously it wouldn't be a choice. We'd pass something at the federal level to work what is the word I'm looking for here? Where you defend your law, you make it real. Not enact. I can't think of the word. Like what cops do. Enforce our law. I get inarticulate sometimes. I got a big vocabulary, but it all gets jumbled up and I can't find the right words at times. They can work against me. Nor do women enjoy equality in their own homes, where they still shoulder 70% of the household duties, and the only major change in the last 15 years is that now middle-class men think they do more around the house. In fact, a national poll found the ranks of women saying that husbands share equally in child care shrunk from 31% in 1987 to 1% in 1987 from 40% 3 years earlier. Furthermore, in 30 states, it is still generally legal for husbands to R-word their wives. I'm outside. I do not want to say that word. And only 10 states have laws mandating arrest for domestic violence. Only what, man? This book, I said it was opening my eyes in so many ways with these statistics. My little background, as if it doesn't shape and impact me to this day. Grew up in a house witnessing domestic violence regularly, mixed with alcohol. So, pretty, I can't think of the word again. And it doesn't matter. Let's just move on. It's hard to talk about. Women who have no other option but to flee find that it isn't much of an alternative either. Federal funding for battered women's shelters has been withheld, and 1/3 of the 1 million battered women who seek emergency shelter each year can find none. Clothes from men contributed to far more to rising numbers of bag ladies than the ill effects of feminism. Still don't know what bag lady is. Maybe I should look it up. In the 1980s, almost half of all homeless women, the fastest growing segment of the homeless, were refugees of domestic violence. The word may be that women have been liberated, but women themselves seem to feel otherwise. Repeatedly in national surveys, majorities of women say that they are still far away from equality. Nearly 70% of women polled by the New York Times in 1989 said the movement for women's rights has only just begun. Most women in 1990, Virginia Slim's opinion poll, agreed with the statement that conditions for their sex in American society has improved a little, not a lot. In poll after poll in the decade, overwhelming majorities of women said they needed equal pay and equal job opportunities. They needed an equal rights amendment, which we still haven't passed. I thought Joe Biden was going to be proactive in getting that passed, at the very least. I mean, you're not. They needed the right to an abortion without government interference. Lost it in red states. Needed a federal law guaranteeing maternity leave. Still don't have that. I believe Kamala Harris would work towards that. At least some sort of like state option or something like the Affordable Care Act for paid leave. They needed decent child services. They have none of these. Mom Donnie gave it doing universal child care. I'm just looking for optimism here. So how exactly have we won the war for women's rights? Seen against the background, the much ballyhooed claim that feminism is responsible for making women miserable becomes absurd. It's always been absurd to me. I can't even read it with a straight face. It's so crazy. It's stupid as fuck. Like, if feminism did that, then why were women miserable before it? What was doing it and what's doing it now? Bro, what? That makes no sense. Like I said in my description for the last video, the logic and reason of right-wingers is on the level of a child. Pretty sure women were way more miserable before feminism. They just had no outlet to express it. So you telling me we liberated them, right, and they're still miserable? Then what the fuck is the other option? Talking to right-wingers. They had no rights. They were miserable. You say they're liberated. They're still miserable. So it sounds like they believe the problem is just women. It's genetic. And I'm sure they agree. All right, we're about to come on my favorite terms here. The female burnout, the man shortage. Seeing against this background, the ballyhooed claim the feminism... I believe this book is giving me a laugh. Feminism is responsible for making women miserable becomes absurd and irrelevant. As we shall see in the chapters to follow, the afflictions ascribed to feminism are all myths. From the man shortage to the infertility epidemic to female burnout to toxic daycare, these so-called female crises have had their origins not in the actual conditions of women's lives, but rather in a closed system that starts and ends in the media, popular culture, and advertising, an endless feedback loop that perpetuates and exaggerates its own false images of womanhood. Women themselves don't single out women's movement as their source of misery. To the contrary. And that's another thing. If we're about to get into some numbers, but a number I read last night. If feminism is making women miserable, why are like between 61 and 67% of women in the world identifying as feminists? If it's making them miserable. Hell, motherfucker. 41% of U.S. men identify as feminists. Myself included, proudly. And man, that number being that high gave me so much hope. Huh. Okay. To the contrary, I never thought I'd have so much fucking fun reading and reacting to a book. To the contrary, in national surveys, 75 to 95% of women credit the feminist campaign with improving their lives. And similar proportions say that the women's movement would keep pushing for change. Should keep pushing for change, excuse me. Less than 8% think the women's movement might have actually made their lot worse. 8%! And what, man, bro. Like, I'm just laughing, right? Like, what are you doing, man? What are you talking about? Like, what world are you living in? Like, I guess the answer, they don't talk to real women. They just, they decide what they think. What actually is troubling the American female population then? If the many ponderers of the woman question really want to know, they might have asked their subjects. That's what I'm talking about. Like, you're not talking to any real women. You just extrapolating from thin air. In public opinion surveys, women consistently rank their own inequality at work and at home among their most urgent concerns. But not as feminism. Over and over, women complain to pollsters about lack of economic, non-marital, is that not a nor? I got juice, nectary juice on my book. Not marital opportunities. They protest that working men, not working women, fail to spend time in the nursery and in the kitchen. Ladies, I love all that domestic work. Put me to work. The Ropers organizations, I'm good at it too. Survey analysts find that men's opposition to equality is a major cause of resentment and stress. I don't understand what kind of man would oppose equality, but you have to be so insecure. It is justice for their gender, not wedding rings and bassinets that women believe to be in desperate short supply. Oh, it's not the man shortage? It's my favorite term, man shortage. When the New York Times polled women in 1989 about the most important problem facing women today, job discrimination was the overwhelming winner. None of the crises the media and popular culture has so assiduously promoted even made the charts. Man, the media is just creating a world that does not exist, just like social media. And some people's minds are poisoned, and I can't fix them. We can't fix. Nobody can change anything. In the 1990 Virginia Slims poll, women were most upset by their lack of money, followed by the refusal of their men to shoulder childcare and domestic duties. By contrast, when the women were asked where the quest for a husband or the desire to hold a less pressure job or to stay at home ranked on their list of concerns, they placed them at the bottom. You hear that? The less pressure job, stay at home, they don't want that. They want a pressure job. They not so much a pressure job, a job that allows them to have status and money and meaning, and they don't want to stay at home. Like, even with this trad wife shit, the women that do that find themselves miserable, because of course they do. Who wants to be subservient to somebody, especially somebody who's probably mediocre compared to you? Like, if a man wants a trad wife, all that is to me is he's afraid of her talking to any other men in the outside world at work or the store or whatever. Keep her at home so she doesn't leave my sorry ass. As the last decade ran its course, women's unhappiness with inequality only mounted. In national polls, the ranks of women protesting discriminatory treatment in business, political, and personal life climbed sharply. The proportion of women complaining of unequal employment opportunities jumped from 10 points from the 1970s, and the number of women complaining of unequal barriers to job advancement climbed even higher. I hope at some point in this book they talk about the body image shit from the 1990s and 2000s, which totally derailed millennial women. And, like, I feel that shit was on purpose. Because, like, look what we're talking about right now. What women were saying their main issues were in terms of the workplace and home. And then you want to talk about body image and shit. Like I said, if you want to derail a movement, talk about irrelevant, dumb shit. Like waist size. Oh, my God. I can't believe it works. I thought we were smarter than this. We're letting the media control us. In such stupid ways. You gotta be above that. Oh, man, I'm different, man. I don't watch advertisements. I don't watch TV. I try to think for myself as much as possible. I read print media. I read books. I check multiple sources. By the end of the decade, 80% to 95% of women said that they suffer from job discrimination. That's insane. And unequal pay. Sex discrimination charges filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission rose nearly 25% in the Reagan years. Ironically, women found their voice during the Reagan years. And charges of general harassment directed at working women more than doubled. In the decade, complaints of sexual harassment nearly doubled. At home, a much increased proportion of women complained of posters of male mistreatment unequal relationships, and male efforts to, in the words of Virginia Slim's poll, keep women down. The share of women in the Roper surveys who agreed that men were basically kind, gentle, and thoughtful fell from 70% in 1970 to 50% in 1990. Wow. That makes sense. We were coming off the hippie movement and shit in the 60s. I guess everybody was kinder. And then the 70s like came around, and 80s, and everything changed for whatever reason. We came about individualism. Probably the government with the CIA and propaganda. I don't know. And outside of their homes, women felt more threatened too. In the 1990 Virginia Slim's poll, 72% of women said they felt more afraid and uneasy on the streets today than they did a few years ago. I believe it was all on purpose. Like the government, just like and the CIA and the FBI and all the alphabet intelligence agencies said, we can never let the hippie movement happen again. No more free love. Make everything about individualism and put this shit on lock. Segment and segregate everybody. You know how I know this? I read a quote one time. It said, to understand the true nature of darkness, look within yourself. And if I were an evil right-wing leader, that's what I would do. All right. And there's no way the things I can think of could be as evil as what the CIA, the FBI, and all these other agencies could whip up. Trust me. So it's even worse than what I think, probably. And that's the scary part. And now you got technology. Oh yeah, they got the show on lock. Lest this be attributed only to a general rise in criminal activity, but contrast, only 49% of men felt this way. I don't feel unsafe walking on the streets. Never have. I don't have to. I imagine mostly all women do. While the women's movement has certainly made women more cognizant of their own inequality, the rising course of female protest shouldn't be written off as a feminist-induced oversensitivity. The monitors that serve to track slippages in women's status have been working overtime since the 1980s. Government and private surveys are showing that women's already vast representation in the lowliest occupations is rising. Their tiny presence in higher paying jobs and craft jobs stalled or is backsliding. Their minuscule representation in upper management posts stagnant or falling, and their pay dropping in the very occupations where they have made the most progress. Progress in quotes. The status of women lowest on the income ladder has plunged mostly perilously. Government budget cuts in the first 4 years of the Reagan administration alone pushed nearly 2 million female-headed families and nearly 5 million women below the poverty line. And the prime target of government rollbacks has been only one sex. 1/3 of the Reagan budget cuts, for example, came out of programs that predominantly served women, even more extraordinarily than when one considers that all the programs combined represent only 10% of the federal budget. Wow. The alarms aren't just going off in the workforce. In national politics, the already small number of women in both elective posts and political appointments fell during the 1980s. In private life, the average amount that a divorced man paid in child support fell by 25% from the late 70s to the mid 80s to a mere $140 a month. That's crazy. That's nothing. I mean, even now, they'll be, what, like $300? Still nothing. I don't know about 300, like with inflation. I don't know, like 2230, I don't know. It's nothing. Domestic violence shelters recorded more than 100% increase in the numbers of women taking refuge in their quarters between 1983 and 1987. Damn. And the government records chronicled a significant rise in sexual violence against women. Reported rapes more than doubled from the early 70s and nearly twice the rate of all other violent crimes and 4 times the overall crime rate in the United States. While the homicide rate declined, sex-related murders rose 160% from 1976 and 1984. And these murders weren't simply at random, impersonal byproduct of violent society. At least 1/3 of the women were killed by their husbands or boyfriends. And the majority of the group were murdered just after declaring their independence in the most intimate manner by filing for divorce and leaving home. Damn. By the end of the decade, and like, let me share a personal story for anybody still listening to this point in the video. I remember growing up, my mom would always get in these fights with my dad, like literal physical fights with violence. And she would always pull out the phone book and say, I'm going to find a lawyer and divorce him. You think she ever did it? Nope. And now I understand she's probably afraid he'd kill her. By the end of the decade, women were starting to tell posters that they feared their sexist social status was once again beginning to slip. We're going to wrap up here pretty soon. They believed that they were facing an erosion of respect, as the 1998 Virginia Slims poll summed up that sentiment. After years in which an increasing number of women had said that their status had improved from decades earlier, the proportion suddenly shrunk by 5% in the last half of the 1980s, the Roper organization reported. And it fell most sharply among women in their 30s, the age group most targeted by the media and advertisers, dropping about 10 percentage points between 1985 and 1996. There you go. It's not feminism that made women happy. It was the media. Media makes everybody happy, so I don't watch TV or do any of that shit. Social media, none of it. I'm happier than I've ever been in a time where everybody's miserable. What does that tell you? So, and feminism ain't making me unhappy. It's quite the contrary. It's the literal opposite. Some women began to piece the picture together. In the 1989 New York Times poll, more than half of black women and 1/4 of white women put it into words. The black women were ahead, of course. Because they don't have the white skin to slide back on in case things go wrong. They don't have that luxury. Which isn't a luxury at all, unless you're rich. They told pollsters they believed men were now trying to retreat the gains women had made in the last 25 years. I want more autonomy, was how one woman, a 37-year-old nurse, put it, and her estranged husband wanted to take it away. The truth is that the last decade has seen a powerful counter-assault of women's rights, a backlash, an attempt to retract the handful of small, hard-won victories that the feminist movement did manage to win for the women. This counter-assault is largely insidious and a kind of pop culture version of the big lie. We're going to get to that thing I was talking about, I feel like, pretty soon. The media. It stands the truth boldly on its head and proclaims that the very steps that had elevated women's position had actually led to their downfall. That's a good place to stop. Everybody, this is Backlash. See you in the next one.